All right, everybody, welcome back to another segment of the Libertarian Minority Radio. Today we have Alex Merced from alexmerced.com joining us. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
And
How
that's
you
all
doing?
the time we have left for today. Thank you for joining us, Alex, and we'll catch
Not a
you all
problem.
next time. Hello, everybody. This is the Libertarian Minority conducting his first interview with none other than Alex Merced. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you doing today?
I'm doing very good. So one of the things we like to do on the show is talk a lot about, minorities in the Libertarian Party and Latinos, blacks. We like to, and I like to think of it as a way of organizing the Libertarian Party and seeing what we can do to get more minorities involved in our cause and how they can benefit. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was specifically something that impacts minorities a lot is welfare and its effects. Could you talk to us a little bit about the effects of welfare on poor communities?
Okay. I mean, I'll talk to these things in my own experience. So, like for
Okay.
example, I grew up. I grew up on welfare. Basically, what happened is that my mom and my dad it didn't quite work out. And basically, my mom was a single mom raising me and my younger brother, but she was working 3 jobs. She was going to school, but I mean, one of the biggest things that helped her was family. The fact that she had a support system there, that kind of helped be around for me and my brother while she was able to work 2, 3 jobs to put food on the table and go to school. So that way, she does have the middle class life that she does now. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with needing help and getting help. My mom got help when she needed it. Now the thing when it comes to government aid programs, though, is that they take out a lot of the discovery of how's the best way to provide aid. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is that government doesn't necessarily have competition to discover to put the pressures on it to make the system better as far as figuring out who needs the aid, what's the best way to give the aid, etc. So generally when it comes to any kind of government program, my issue isn't whether people need help or not. Whether when government does it, do we have the incentives in place to, 1, do it well, and 2, discover how to do it better. So that's why I generally prefer private charities where they have more flexibility to vet who they provide aid to. And then if they find out that if I'm someone who's donating to a charity and I see that aid is not being used in the best capacity, I can choose to donate to another charity where I have. So that competition helps bring efficiency, so that way we can help more people. Because if you can stretch those dollars out further, you can help more people more often. But it doesn't necessarily. But again, what I always try to be careful of is, as a libertarian, doesn't necessarily mean I'm against the idea of helping people, because a lot of times people who are not libertarians will try to put you into that corner where basically having concerns over how government helps people or how that help is not necessarily the best is criticizing the idea of helping people. And I'm all for aid. I just prefer it to be sort of in a more voluntary, more compassionate way. And we can help people now. A lot of people talk about, I've seen people who fall through the cracks, where basically they don't qualify for programs for help they may need. You won't, if people stop thinking that every time we need to give people help, that this should be done through some sort of government program, they can create the program that will catch people who wouldn't have necessarily been caught in that way to get the help they need, because it'll be individuals voluntarily making those efforts. But a lot of people can't, because we tax so much, because we regulate so much. The cost of living has gone up. And basically, as the cost of living goes up, you have to work extra hours to put food on the table, which means that's time you can't spend with your family. That's time you can't spend doing charitable work or donating, and money you can be donating to charity. So if we lowered taxes, we lowered regulations, made life cheaper, basically we would see more charitable donations. You'd see people donating their time more. But on top of that, also you won't necessarily there won't be as many people who need help, because if I work 3 hours less, that's 3 hours somebody else could work. But right now, government makes things cost so much that it creates that dynamic.
And I think it's important to note that a lot of the red tape and a lot of our money that does go to helping out, with these welfare programs, a lot of that money gets lost in government red tape and bureaucracy. I think the saying goes, like, for every dollar you put into government, you get 80 cents of it back. It's not very efficient, like you're saying. Like, private charities are very efficient, much more efficient than government. And I think, the point you made earlier about libertarians getting kind of put into a corner of, oh, you just don't want to help the poor, you don't believe in help. No, actually, I think libertarians want to help people the most. One of the Facebook pages, Being Libertarian and Voluntarism in Action, is always posting about, these charitable things about GoFundMe, and I'm seeing like scores of libertarians donating a lot of money just because it's a cause they believe in. And I think that's one of the things that libertarians need to, articulate better, is that we're not against helping poor people. We just want it to be in a more voluntaristic way as opposed to the government, forcing their hand upon you.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. That's why generally my approach when I advocate for libertarianism, instead of focusing on how government is a bad solution, I try to focus on how individuals are a better solution. Because because the problem is people have a hard time letting go of government, because at first they don't necessarily know what the alternative is. But once you know there's a better alternative, then it's easy to dismiss, okay, I guess I don't need government for this, because you know that there's something there. So the first thing is to convince them what that alternative is, and that's the idea of individuals organizing, charities, businesses, community organizations, voluntary type organizing and funding, and making that effort with the people who are closest to a problem to actually solve that problem. And the thing is that can happen today. So people always say, okay, I want politics to do this. But to get anything you want out of politics, you're talking about several election cycles, which could take decades. And then at the end, you only get a watered down version of the solution you wanted. But if you got together with your neighbors, your family, your friends, you can make a solution that works the way you want it to work today. And it forces you to think it through. Because the fact that I have to convince people to donate to my idea forces me to think of how to make my idea work best. I have to vet it, because if I can't convince someone else my idea works, then I need to go back to the drawing board and think deeper about it and make it better. And that process doesn't happen when people use government to just force an idea to happen. That vetting, that continual vetting kind of falls through the cracks.
Agreed. And another one of the things that I think negatively impacts minority communities is specifically the drug war. And this could pertain to all drugs, but I think specifically it's been getting better over the years. But marijuana and the decriminalization of marijuana. What are some of your thoughts about the drug war and its impact on communities?
Yeah, like most other issues, I come to this out of a place where my personal experience influenced my thoughts on this the most, especially when it comes to the drug war and to regime change. So in the sense with the drug war, I grew up, my father was a drug abuser when I was younger. He's a great guy now. He's clean. He's got a great life. He's conquered his demons. But I mean, the thing is that was all. And then my brother recently died after years of drug abuse. So drugs affected them. But the thing is that they weren't able to necessarily reach out for help or because what happens is that when you make something illegal, people are scared to go ask for help because they're scared of legal ramifications. That's why we need a policy of compassion, not punishment, where we're not focusing on, how do we punish people who do bad things, but focus on how we can reach out and help people, because oftentimes people who are drug abusers, there's other things going on. Especially when in my case of my father, I mean, a lot of that was just more out of in a sense of escapism, out of depression, whatnot. And then, but again, when you bring in the government, it's just like, it's the same thing you see with prohibition of anything, whether it's prohibition of immigration, prohibition of drugs, prohibition of
alcohol,
anything.
Everything.
Yeah, you just create violence. You create violence. You create a lack of transparency. So it's hard to measure what the extent of drug abuse is out there because people won't come forward. You create crime, and you create these problems that otherwise may not exist. It doesn't mean you're going to get rid of drug abuse entirely. It doesn't mean you're going to get rid of drugs entirely, but you can mitigate some of those problems and actually create transparency around those problems so we can actually address the underlying, which is the individuals choosing to use drugs. But if you can't see the extent of that happening because people won't talk about it because you've made it because of prohibition, you have a problem.
I think when you end the drug war, you kind of solve, you kill two birds with one stone, because a lot of violent crimes, I think like something like 77 or 80% of violent crimes are drug related. So I think when you end the drug war, you eliminate a lot of violence in inner city communities like that. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to approach it that it's a medical and psychological problem. I think we all know a person, one way or another, that may or may not be an abuser of, let's just say, weed, for example, and they use it as an escape. Maybe you can argue whether or not that's a cohesive way to do it, but I think at the end of the day, you need to treat it as a problem of the mind and of medicine, as opposed to something that needs to be, big brother government coming in and forcing their hand upon something they don't think is moral. I think individuals thrive when they're left to make their own decisions at the end of the day.
Agreed. I mean, basically, drug abuse is like abuse of anything else. There's people who become addicted to food and they
Mm-hmm.
abuse it. They eat a lot. They hurt themselves, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should ban food. So there's all sorts of things that where a lot of it is again a matter of individual us reaching out to people and being compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of on the point of violence. I mean, it also even makes the addiction worse,
Mm-hmm.
because if I go to a black market drug dealer, they're more likely to have sort of less ethical sales practices
Mm-hmm.
than a transparent legal provider of any good or service.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what's going to happen is, since they're I go to a drug dealer, they go, oh, I want to buy a joint. Well, here, let me show you this heroin here. So you're more likely to be upsold because there's no transparency there. Like if it was Walgreens and I go to Walgreens to buy a joint and they try to upsell me the heroin, there's probably going to be more of a local outcry saying, oh, you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of putting pressure on them not to do that, versus you don't see that at all. And then plus, like, that local drug dealer can go target the local school.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't, because of the transparency in the legal market.
Mm-hmm.
So generally that's why, another reason why, again, you're reducing the hard drug addiction through legalization, you're reducing the violence, and you're also increasing transparency. And that's the theme for all prohibition. I mean, you can apply the same logic to immigration, because when you talk about like legal versus illegal immigration, illegal immigration is just essentially the same thing as a black market for drugs, in the sense that
absolutely.
there's not enough legal provision of it, so a black market gets created, which brings along violence, lack of transparency, etc. So if you want to get rid of all that, you just need to have a better legal market for it. So we need to have a bigger, more broad legal market for immigration and a more broader legal market for drugs, and you get rid of a lot of the problems that prohibition brings along.
Very good. I like your points about transparency. Those were well put. And one last thing before we move on. I know you have to go. I wanted to talk about market regulations and how that stifles small businesses, and specifically immigrant businesses, and how that negatively impacts them.
Okay, bottom line is that whenever you impose a cost, an extra tax, an extra regulation, you increase the cost. And when you increase the cost of anything, it's going to have the biggest effect on those who have less. So, for example, in the U.S., basically people of color, women, all sorts of different people other than sort of your traditional classes didn't really have access to markets and the economy in the way we have now until like the last 30, 40, 50 years. So what happens is that right now, disproportionately, you have like minorities of lower income or lower wealth, but we need to build that wealth. But if you impose more costs on starting a business, that makes it more difficult to build that wealth. That makes it harder for those disparities that occurred for whatever happened in history to cure themselves naturally through a free market method. When government regulates, so people will say, oh, we want to tax more and regulate more, for equality, but you're actually doing the opposite, because you're making it harder for people to, again, do that sort of wealth catch-up by starting their own businesses, by seeking skills with licensing laws and stuff like that, things that create new barriers to the things that would otherwise allow us to pursue new methods of creating wealth.
And in turn, I think it increases the cost of living too. I mean, this is in addition to a counter to the minimum wage argument. You're going to increase the minimum wage, you're going to increase the cost of living, you're going to make it tougher for these poor people to survive, and that's why virtually no economist is in favor of increasing the minimum wage, because it doesn't just do nothing; it actually hurts poor communities.
Yeah, I want to say no economists. There are economists who are for the minimum wage. I just don't think it's the best economist. But yeah, with the minimum wage, that's another one I love to talk about. So kind of how, like, before I use the analogy of food, I like to use the analogy of food for minimum wage as well to really get the point across. Because imagine if there was like a minimum meal price. So he said, from now on, if you were to buy a meal, you have to pay at least $10 for that meal. Well, I'm going to buy a $10 meal. I'm not going to buy meals that used to cost me $7, like going to McDonald's. I'm just not going to go to McDonald's anymore. If I have to pay $10, I'll go to Shake Shack. So in that case, you price out those maybe lower quality but still demanded services. Same thing with labor. So what happens? That person who can only command $7 an hour can't find the job, because if I have to pay $10, I might as well hire a $10 an hour worker. But at the same time, you're distracting $10 an hour labor from jobs where they may be more valuable. So that person who could take $10 an hour maybe doesn't need to do the $7 an hour job, but since they're getting paid 10, they'll do it. And there's another job somewhere else where they would have been more useful, and now you're misplacing resources as well into not their most productive use to their most productive use, which hurts everybody. Because you lower productivity, that means there's less stuff for all of us to enjoy, which also means
less supply.
everything costs more.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure. Where can anyone watching these videos find you at?
Best place to go is first go to alexmerced.com. There you can find everything. But main things to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/alexmerced. Like me on Facebook, facebook.com/alexmercedlp. And also subscribe to, I have 6 different podcasts over there on iTunes. But the main one to subscribe to is the Alex Mercedcast, where I do interviews generally every week. There's also Libertarian Comments, which is actually syndicating a lot of my old videos from 2008, 2009, 2010. So you can hear kind of how I evolved as a libertarian over the years. And then there's also Breaking Progressives, where I find like a sort of a left-wing article that kind of really misses the mark on certain ideas and break it down so people can understand where they were coming from and why they're wrong.
All right, sounds good. Your healthcare videos on YouTube, I really recommend those, guys. He breaks it down beautifully and why government involvement in healthcare is not good. I really like those videos. Well, Alex, thanks for joining us, and we got to have you back sometime. Great talking with you.
Anytime. I'm always just a call away.
Sounds good. All right, Alex, see you later.
Thank you.
Once again, we'd like to thank Alex for coming onto the show. Now we're going to turn the tables a little bit and talk about something different. I'm going to talk about Colin Moriarty and his situation. So basically what happened is Colin Moriarty is a co-founder of a company and a channel on YouTube called Kinda Funny. And he posted a controversial tweet that said, peace and quiet, hashtag a day without a woman. Now, this was considered controversial among other things. And to be honest, it really gets you thinking, why? Why was this such a controversial joke? It's to be honest, it's basically 90s sitcom humor. I would think I would find this on Family Guy, on The Simpsons, on Married with Children. It's one of those jokes that that's all it is. It's a joke. It's not meant to offend anybody. It's just literally your typical middle-aged dad with kids complaining about women. That's all it is. So he was basically forced to resign from his own company, something that he co-founded. And when you think about it, that's really messed up. Now, at the end of the day, what can be the cause of this? It's really an outrage culture. And I think that's something we need to talk about because it's not talked about enough. When it comes to outrage culture, it's been getting really out of hand to the point where you can get offended by anything. And that's not something that's healthy for society. And let me explain why. When you start regulating what joke is okay to say or what joke isn't okay to say, you start getting this form of social fascism that you're controlling people's thoughts. And that's unhealthy because once you start controlling someone's thoughts or what someone says, you start controlling what they actually think. Now, I thought the joke was hilarious, and I think a lot of people would agree that joke was hilarious. And among the SJWs and leftists, feminazis, they got triggered by it. But they gotta realize it's just a joke at the end of the day. It's like someone making a tasteless 9/11 joke or a tasteless racist joke, Hit or miss, right? It's a joke. And that's what he does. It's a comedy channel. He's a comedian. But when it really comes down to it, it's okay to say those things if you don't mean them in a negative connotation, right? So, for instance, if I were to use what's considered a racist term, wetbag or wetback, for Latinos and Mexicans, but I just say it in a joke, that's all it is. It's a joke. When I start actually using that to put down, people of my own kind, put down Latinos, and you could start saying, okay, you're going into racist territory, which would be totally justified. However, it's not justified when someone's just using it as a joke and someone took it the wrong way and they got offended. You know what? A lot of jokes offend a lot of people. I'm sorry to say it, okay? A lot of things offend a lot of people. But that doesn't mean you can regulate what someone says, and it doesn't mean they should have, ultimately devastating social consequences because of what you think, because of your perception of what it was. So I think this situation's really messed up because he was forced to resign for something he co-founded. And he said it was his own decision. because he felt he would have been a liability as opposed to an asset if he stayed with the company. And that makes total sense. And, you know, mad props to Colin for doing that, okay? It takes a lot of balls to do that. But I think we need to start recognizing, and specifically us, you know, Latinos, we have to start recognizing, guys, it's ridiculous, okay? It's ridiculous to have someone resign from a company that they founded for a joke like that. Come on. It's funny. Come on. It's funny. But second, it's not that big a deal. It's a joke, okay? All of us get roasted 10 times more by our mothers and fathers in a Latino household than anyone else, okay? No, your feelings, they don't matter, okay? Because your mom, whatever you say to me, my mom and dad have said 10 times worse about me. I can guarantee it. Mom, I fell today during soccer. I got a really bad bruise. No, mijo, pues, por pendejo. Mom, I failed this test, but the teacher gave us the wrong study guide. It was the one from last semester. Ay, mijo, no, pues, por pendejo. Ma, my girlfriend broke up with me. No, mijo, pues, por pendejo. Ma, I found out I got cancer. No, mijo, pues, por pendejo. You see what I mean? You can get blamed for pretty much anything. But I guess, you know, the overarching point here would be they're jokes, guys. There's no need to take them so seriously. You know, in this world that we live in, that's full of a lot of suffering, it's full of a lot of bad things, jokes can help us see the ridiculousness of a lot of things. And one of those things that's truly ridiculous is this thought-policing, SJW, feminazi culture. I mean, you get called a speed racer, missing genie, homophone, bigote. You know, like, come on, guy. Like, at the end of the day, they're just words. And that's something we need to remember. They're just jokes, they're just words. And Latino culture has always raised you to be thick-skinned, you know? My dad and mom call each other vieja, viejo, gordo, gorda. You know, it's no big deal, guys. We need to stop this outrage culture. And I think it starts, you know, in our community. And I think it starts with us calling it out when we see it. Calling the BS out when we see it. Okay? Because it's not something that's going to end up well for society when you end up with that social fascism. But anyway, guys, that's just my 2 cents on it. Let me know what you think on the comments below. I wish nothing but success for Colin, and I hope, you know, nothing but success with his future channel, Colin's Last Stand. And until next time, guys, hasta luego.